The carnivore diet, we've seen a lot of benefits from it. A lot of people have reversed all sorts of conditions, autoimmunity. We've seen people treat their cancer with it. We
Mhm.
both shared a guest, Freddie Vardy, treat his, stage 3 colon cancer with it, which is amazing. A lot of people reverse, of course, diabetes and all sorts of disease states. Um, and with my channel, I really get into chronic debilitating illness because that's something I've lived with for a long time now, and that's just where my channel tends to go.
Mhm.
And I've also had quite a few people reach out to me saying they've done carnivore for X number of times, several months or even years, and then they've had like severe adverse reactions to it. I had this one guy saying that he had MS and he became almost completely disabled doing carnivore. I
Oh,
had
wow.
Lady Carnivore come on the channel recently saying that she started getting crazy histamine reactions,
Mm.
these debilitating histamine reactions about 2 years into carnivore. Why do you think it seems to help some people so well, and some
Mhm.
people they kind of go in the opposite direction?
That's a good question. It's always individual. There's always something going on with the specific person. Quite a lot of people, I would say the vast majority of people do very, very well just eating meat and avoiding eating other things. Even if they just reduce the amount of plants and processed foods that they eat, they'll improve their health significantly. And if they completely go off plants, most people do better. And then there are some people like you mentioned that seem to do a bit worse. Um, Quite often, you have to do a lot of troubleshooting with them and try to see exactly what's going on. Sometimes they're not eating exclusively meat and water. Sometimes they're using maybe artificial sweetener, maybe that had some stevia in their electrolytes or some erythritol or something like that, and that reacts poorly with them, and they just seem to react with it. Especially autoimmune issues, you have to be much more careful. They're going to be much more sensitive. Even the different kinds of meats seem to affect people with autoimmune issues and other people who are more sensitive just a little more strongly. So a good example of that would be um, Michaela Peterson. She can't eat pork. She says pork gives her as bad a reaction for her rheumatoid arthritis as some fruits and plants, and so she really has to stay away from that. I think that's mostly to do with what the animal is being fed. Pork's fed a lot of soy quite often, and it's not designed to eat soy, and so it doesn't have all the mechanisms and machinery to break this stuff apart and digest it and eliminate these toxins safely. And so you get a little bit of this in the meat, and that seems to be enough to set off those sorts of reactions. Quite a lot of people with autoimmune issues really do have to stick to grass-fed and finished red meat, at least early on. And sometimes they can branch out after that once their bodies has healed a little bit. So, each one of those people, I would dig deep into, what exactly are you eating? How much are you eating? What foods, what meats, and are they store bought? Are they grass fed, grass finished? Are there any artificial sweeteners whatsoever? Um, the histamine reaction one is interesting. Some people, I don't know if it's histamines. We're certainly thinking. I mean, people seem to think that's something that they're having. They're having a histamine response, like to older meat or aged meat. Um, and so some people they just need more fresh cuts of meat, and they can't even like let it sit in the refrigerator for a day or so, or else they'll get this weird reaction. And so for any of those people, if you notice that sort of pattern, if you notice that something is getting worse, if you're eating that particular kind of meat in that particular way, just avoid it. It doesn't really matter what's causing the reaction. Something's causing it. Something's triggering you. Something's setting you off. And just avoid it. Try to find some meats that aren't giving you that reaction. Usually people can do that. And then the other one is something that I found to be fairly rare, but certainly something that I've seen, which would be that term oxalate dumping that people come across. If you have a lot of oxalates and you sequester this stuff in your cells, that just by not eating that, eventually your body's going to try to just get rid of this stuff. It sort of locked it and trapped it away. And now it's going to try to get rid of it. And it's sort of getting into your system. And it can actually cause symptoms of high oxalates consumption as well. So that's something that I sort of think of think of as a diagnosis of exclusion after we've gone through all the different sorts of things and did a lot of troubleshooting for everything else. They say, okay, well, look, we tried everything else. You're still having these weird, unfortunate symptoms. Maybe try Sally Norton's low oxalate protocol to see if that can dampen it. And sometimes it helps. And so each one of those things has to be carefully looked at and dug into, because they're all going to have a different problem. But I think biologically, humans are designed to eat meat, and I think we are all Homo sapiens sapiens, and so biologically we should all have the same biological machinery and physiology to have meat be our optimal diet. And so we can do things to them, to meat, that may change it in certain ways. We're feeding the animal something differently. We're aging it in a certain way, maybe using certain preservatives or coloring. That's another thing too that people don't think about all the time, is that a lot of stores will put different chemicals on meat to make it look more red and more appealing and attractive, and that's going to get into you. So people could be reacting to that as well. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. But yeah, you're right. There are people that can have trouble with it. Generally, I mean, I've worked with many people that have had issues like that. At least for the people that I've helped, we've been able to find what was wrong and get them on the right track and be able to do it successfully, though.
So this sort of ties in with that a little bit. You mentioned that, there are some mistakes that potentially people could be making on a carnivore diet that could be hindering their ability to heal. What do you think, if you could just name maybe a few? I don't want to, get into 100, different things that, a list of mistakes people are making. But if you had to pick maybe the top 3 mistakes people are making, either starting or continuing on a carnivore diet, what do you think they would be?
Oh, I think first and foremost would be not eliminating all the different things and sweeteners and artificial additives and ingredients and things like that. I most commonly I see people have continued problems or stalls with weight loss, or even improvements in their health. I remember this one lady that I was speaking to online. She was saying that she really loved carnivore because it helped all her autoimmune issues, and she came off medications and things were going great. And she felt really good, but she wasn't really losing as much weight as she wanted to. So, it sort of was unfortunate that carnivore didn't work for her. To me, that sounds like it was working great. She was doing well. She came off medications and she stopped major illnesses. And so I think that's a big win. And then I sort of asked her the same thing. What exactly are you eating? How much are you eating? Things like that. And it turned out, I'm just eating meat and water. Okay, so no artificial sweeteners, absolutely nothing in coffee. This, oh, I still use coffee and I use monk fruit sugar. It's like, okay, so that's something else. And people think because they're eating a lot more meat or almost exclusively meat, that the other little things here aren't that big of a deal, but they can be, and especially for certain people. So I think that's a major thing, is if you're having problems, really do try to cut down to bare bones, just meat and water, at least for 30 days, see how it makes you feel. And then if you want, you can start adding things back in one at a time and see how it makes you feel. And if you're not having that big of a reaction or you don't mind the reaction, you can include it, but at least you know what that's doing. And then the other one would be, a major one would be not eating enough, because it's very easy to undereat on a carnivore diet or any ketogenic diet, because it changes the way our body processes or looks at energy. When insulin's up, it gives you these blood sugar swings, and your blood sugar goes low, and you need to eat something to bring it up, because insulin forces energy into cells, doesn't allow it to come out of cells, and so your blood sugar is going to keep going down until you fill it back up with more carbs. But it also blocks leptin, which tells your brain how much fat you have in storage. And so your brain doesn't see that. It panics and says, we don't have any energy stores. Our blood sugar is dropping. We need to eat right now. And you get this panic signal, eat now, eat now, eat now. We're in trouble. And so we can easily overeat. And so that we think of that as hunger, but that's actually a pathological starvation signal, I believe. And so our actual hunger signals are much more subtle. And so it's very easy. Well, people say, well, I'm just satisfied. I don't feel like I need to eat, compared to how you felt before, of course. But it's very important to make sure that you relearn your hunger signals. And a good way of doing that is by taste. Usually, if you're only eating meat, fatty meat will taste good if you're hungry and your body wants it. And then that positive feedback will get less and less and less as your body wants less of it. And eventually it won't really taste that good. And so I think that's a good way of looking at it. And then another one is not eating enough fat in particular. That's something that people commonly do just because we're so used to eating very, very little fat. And so even a lot more fat than we're used to eating may not be enough for your body. And so just keep that in mind if you're having problems with your energy levels or any other sorts of problems. You're like, I'm just not really feeling my best. Think, am I getting enough fat? And then, just to add a quick fourth in there, a lot of people will will just come off of it, eat something else, like, go to a dinner with family and just sort of feel the need to eat some rice or something like that. Or maybe they have some alcohol, they go out and then they think, okay, well, I didn't do it. I couldn't stick to pure 100%. And so, I guess I just can't do this. It's not for me. Of course you can. Of course you can just go back and just start it the next day. You don't have to then just give up entirely. But some people think that. And so, that's of course, you're not off the team just because, you had a salad or some rice.
So what do you think? I might land in some hot water here, but what do you think of what some people categorize as like dirty carnivore? So like bacon, cheese, cold cuts like salami, that type of stuff. Do you think that plays a big role in optimal health, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it does. I think it does make a difference. I mean, I certainly notice a difference when I eat those sorts of things. I still feel extremely good, but I don't feel as good as when I'm just eating beef, let's say. But it doesn't make a huge difference for me. I'm not that sensitive to these sorts of things, but I don't feel my best. And, so if someone doesn't find that there's too much of an issue with it, then, that's up to them. They can do that. And if they feel good, then great. But if you're not feeling great, if you're not feeling your best, think about that. Think about the extra little things that are slipping in. My hard rule for myself is no plants, no sugar, any sweeteners, nothing artificial. And that will go for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. And so, if you look at the ingredient list, even on a salami, you'll see pork, and then sugar might be the next ingredient. And you'd be like, okay, well, maybe not that one. And so, maybe find something that doesn't have as much, spices and sugars and all that sort of stuff on it. And, and just see how you feel. Dairy is a bit of a gray area. I think that's an easy way that people can stall on their, especially if they're trying to lose weight. I just noticed that some people that if they're adding in dairy, it's funny. There's a lot of good things in dairy, and especially raw dairy, but it's not necessarily a complete set of nutrients. It's not complete food for humans. And so I find that, the body chases nutrients more than it chases calories. And so if you're getting in milk, yes, that's getting in things that you need, but it's lacking other things. And so people tend to eat a lot, more or less the same amount of meat, regardless of the amount of dairy they eat. And I noticed, this is just something that I've noticed people doing, including myself. And so you can tend to have a bit more than maybe you would want. And I've actually seen people put on weight on a carnivore diet by adding in a lot of dairy. And at first they lose 20 pounds in a month, and then a few months later they're just eating tons of cheese and yogurt and drinking milk, and all of a sudden they just regain that 20 pounds. And so it's something to think about anyway, if you're not getting the results that you want.
Right. I have to say, just me personally, I do cringe a little bit on these, 2 sticks of butter a day kind of diets. And I do see a lot of that, people sort of gaining weight or not being able to lose weight, and, not having quite the same metabolism as somebody who, say, like a 25-year-old young lady who does fine with 2 sticks of butter a day. So, but what do you think about, like, the quality of meat, like regenerative versus sort of modern, farming practices today? Do you think that that's a big deal? Like if somebody sort of goes in to the dollar bin and grabs some chicken versus, maybe going to a quality farm like White Oak Pastures or something along those lines?
I think it does make a difference. I mean, I think it's all relative. That dollar bin chicken is still going to be better than any salads or anything else you would care to choose. And so if that's what you can afford and that's what you have access to, then and go for it. If it makes you feel good and that's what you can afford, great. But no, I mean, there are objective benefits to animals raised in regenerative methods. I've seen a number of talks by people. There was a gentleman who did regenerative farming, and he gave a university lecture. I think it was at Hillsdale College, and he was talking about just his chickens and the nutrient profile of the folate on his eggs. And I believe it was the national average reported in the governmental numbers was, I think it was 41 milligrams of folate in a normal chicken egg, and his had over 1,000. So it's a dramatic difference. And I've spoken to a number of regenerative farmers, and they've sent their beef off for testing, and they routinely get 3 to 4 times the micronutrient level of normal beef. So I think there's definitely a difference there. But just because I don't have access to all of the regenerative farmers where I'm at, it's hard to get that direct link with ranchers here in Australia. There are some people that will do it, like Wolke Farm over on the East Coast, but I'm sort of talking to him to get a huge a pallet of things sent over. But you have to literally get like a shipping crate sort of thing full of meat, and so it's just like, I'm going to try to see if someone else can go in on it with me. But but they look at that, and they will routinely get higher quality nutrients in that, because the soil is getting more enriched, and that enriches the grass, which then enriches the animal, which then enriches the soil again. So it's just every generation it gets more and more nutrient dense. But at the moment, mostly what I do is I go to Costco and I get meat in bulk, and I've got some stuff from some local ranchers. It's called Butcher Crowd, sort of like Butcher Box in America. So this is an Australian version of that. And so I've started ordering boxes of meat from them, and that's all grass fed and finished, pasture raised sort of stuff, and it just tastes better. I mean, it does taste better, and I enjoy that. But by and large, if you can get that, that's great. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone can afford that or has access to it. And so if you can't, don't get discouraged. Store-bought, Safeway beef is still excellent. And I think of it sort of in the way that I would with the Olympics, gold and silver at the Olympics. So the silver medalist lost to gold, but the silver medalist also beat everyone else on earth. So it's still a pretty good position to be in if you can't get the first place.